Maya, it's a delight to have you here. Now, you are author of Paving, Conversations with Incredible Women Who Are Shaping Our World. It's a book that contains interviews of 25 amazing women leaders from around the world. It's a prolific work. You get the feeling that you have been thinking about this for a long time. When did you actually decide to write the book?
So there were a couple of events that made me realize that I wanted to write the book. One of them was the Women's March, which I went to 4 years ago back in January of 2017. And looking back, I think that was the event that really opened my eyes to this world of gender equality and gender diversity, but also kind of the downside, sexism, sexist stereotypes, the barriers that women face every day. And so I was also writing for my school newspaper, and I needed something to publish for the next issue that was coming out. And so I decided to talk to my newly elected mayor, Mayor Mary Lou Polly, and that was the first interview that I did for the book. But at the time, I didn't know I was writing a book. But after our interview, she suggested that I reach out to a couple more female politicians. So I took her advice and I spoke with Senator Patty Murray, Senator Maria Cantwell, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, and published those in the school newspaper as well. And then at that point, I kind of decided to branch out into other domains like journalism and filmmaking. And after that, I think that was the point when I realized I wanted to write a book to share the stories and the struggles and also the incredible advice that these women had to share with me so that it could be open to a wider audience, more than just the people at my school and my teachers.
So 4 years have gone into this, is what I'm hearing. You got the idea at the Women's March. So how old were you then?
I was, I think so, I was in seventh grade, so middle school time. But when I was at the Women's March, I wasn't really thinking about a book. I was just my bubble kind of expanded.
Which women stood out the most? I mean, it's always the first one because you remember that as well. And that started you on this path. But which woman stood out the most for you in and amongst all 25?
That's always a hard question because I have more than one favorite. I think just the fact that they have so much courage and perseverance. For me as a teenage girl, looking up to these women is what impresses me and inspires me. A couple of my favorites would definitely be Dr. Janet Yellen, who's currently the Treasury Secretary in the U.S., and then Dr. Jocelyn Bell Burnell, who's an astrophysicist, and she discovered pulsars. Of course, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern of New Zealand. I think she's amazing and such a nice person. But yeah, of course, Mayor Mary Lou Polly. That was my first one. That's kind of how I got started. So she was also another one of my favorites.
So I've read it, and it's journalism, but there's also the feeling of a connection, that there's something that connects these women, not just the fact that you've interviewed them, but their common traits that stand out amongst the women that you profiled. What for you, what are those common traits? What do you think they have in common?
Yeah, so I mean, one of them would be obviously the confidence, courage, grit, perseverance that they all had to overcome the struggles and the obstacles that are thrown at them because they're women in their respective industries. I definitely saw some sort of commonality, some overlapping themes with the advice that they shared. And some of my favorites would be being curious, being able to handle rejection, like making sure rejection lifts you up and motivates you rather than kind of pins you down, having empathy and respect for other people, defining your own success, aiming higher, being the change you want to see. For example, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, one of the reasons she ran for Congress was because she wanted to see more voices from people of color, women, younger voices, and so she went about doing that. But I mean, above all, I think being confident, have the confidence that these women have had is one of the things that has brought them to where they are today. And I think that's important for anyone.
And I love that. It really is the grit. There's an authenticity in this. There's a feeling that it's not just about their stories, but it's also about inspiring us to step up. So I want to step away from the book for a moment and really take a hard look at what the other message is here, which is to take a look at gender stereotypes and ones that probably even impact you, Maya, if you think about it. You know, a young girl writing a book, people probably always in interviews, the ones I've seen, they focus on the novelty when actually we should be focused on the diversity, right? What were some of the ways that you've been thinking about how to apply this to, for example, get rid of gender stereotypes, especially in classrooms, because that's where you are and you're a champion on, starting there?
Thank you. Yeah, I've definitely learned so much from the book and from their stories. And then also, I'm still learning about these issues of diversity and representation. So, from what I've seen and from what I've experienced too, the main gender stereotype is around having more boys than girls in engineering, programming, tech classes, the robotics team. And so, what ends up happening is that boys, because of societal norms and gender norms, they have a bit of a head start in programming more so than girls do when they first enter a classroom. And so most girls feel a little less competent in their abilities in that classroom. And so they get a bit discouraged to pursue or to take the next level of programming class. So you might ask yourself, well, why is that? And so I was talking to Robin Hauser the other day, who's a filmmaker, and I also interviewed her for the book, and she has a film called Code Debugging the Gender Gap, and she was telling me that boys tend to get more exposure to the problem-solving skills, the critical thinking skills that they need for programming. And that's because, I mean, if you just look at the way that companies market their toys and their products, if you go to like Target or something, you can clearly see the aisle that's for boys and then the aisle that's for girls. A young girl is more likely to, and I'm not saying all girls, but I'm saying more likely to, more inclined to pick up a pink, sparkly doll or toy makeup kit or nail kit rather than in the other aisle with robots or transformers or dark blue, black puzzles or video games that are clearly marketed and made for boys. And so because of that, boys tend to have a bit of a head start in the programming class. And so to remove that, to defy that gender norm and gender stereotype, it's important to introduce STEM at a really early age. In fact, the earlier the better, because the younger kids are, girls specifically, the less likely they are going to be aware of these gender norms and those stereotypes, gender stereotypes that I was talking about. And if we get more girls in the classroom, in the programming class or robotics team, then more girls will join. Because actually there are quite a bit of girls that are interested in those classes, but because there's no one like them in that room, like there are no other girls, or maybe their friends aren't in that class, they don't really want to take that class. And so by encouraging more girls to take a programming or tech engineering class or join the robotics team, that means that we'll have a bigger interest from girls when they are in college, when they are in their careers, they'll pursue STEM disciplines. And because of that, we'll end up seeing the ratio of women to men leaders sort of increase. And that has, those female leader role models has, it kind of fuels the next generation of girls to give them someone to look up to so that they can see what they're capable of becoming. So it's kind of like at each step, you have to make sure you're incorporating representation and diversity and equality, equitable environments at each step to remove those gender stereotypes.
Change happens when we reach out and help each other. And that's what I'm hearing here. It's about being encouraged. It's about having a role model, having a mentor, someone that believes in us, someone who's reaching out and helping us. And there's a question of, how can women give back? Now, obviously, you're a little young, Maya, but you have a very broad view and a very future-focused view that you can probably also think right now already about how, young students in these classes can give back and help, even younger girls into understanding what they can do and what their possibilities are, what their potential is. Are you applying this already in your own life? Are you reaching out to help others up the ladder?
I mean, I'd love to. I hope that that's what this book is doing. It's kind of hard to see, with the pandemic, I can't really see the actual
Mm.
effect of the book. But I mean, I would love to do that. I think that's incredibly important to show for one girl to show another group of girls what they're capable of doing when it comes to programming, when they aren't the only girl in the classroom. I would have loved when I took my first programming class if there were other girls in the classroom so that I could be encouraged and not even have to think about the fact that I'm the only girl in the classroom. That is a very consuming thought in and of itself.
What's really exciting about, first of all, reading what you've done, knowing what you've done, speaking with you now, we have seen that new ideas, bright ideas, and bright young people, that can equal change. We've seen that in environment. We've seen it with Greta. We've seen it with others.
Mm-hmm.
You have a voice. You can give that voice to others. What do you plan to do, or what are your plans to ensure that what you're talking about in the book, what you're talking about with me right now, that can be realized?
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying. There are a lot of young voices that we're seeing being spotlighted right now. The problem I feel like is that they tend to get neglected because they are voices from younger people, and decisions tend to get made for us rather than us making our own decisions or speaking up for ourselves. And so, yeah, that piece of activism from younger people is very important. And I mean, in terms of how I plan to share my voice and help give voices to other young girls I mean, so first of all, I'll say, I think people think that you have to take a really big step in order to make some amount of tangible change. It can be as small as, like you were saying earlier, being the captain of your robotics team. I do have other girls on my robotics team that, I don't want to speak for them, but if there was a boy captaining the team, it might have felt a little more like, well, I'm the only girl on this team, so I don't really want to be here. I don't really feel comfortable in this robotics team. And so something as small as that is enough to make some tangible change. And you don't have to, you don't have to be at Greta Thunberg's level, for example, to change the world. You can change the world in your own way and in your own life. And I think that's something that people tend to get, especially young people, tend to get a little bit overwhelmed with.
I love hearing that, the small steps that do make a huge difference. Speaking of steps, what's the next step for you? Do you have plans, for example, to write another book? You were talking about filmmaking. Maybe you're going to be going in that direction. What is next for Maya Sharma?
Well, in terms of another book, I mean, I would love to write another book. It might not happen for the next couple of years because I am in high school. Um, but I mean, so the thing with Paving is that I was really in it. I was really inspired by the women that I had initially talked to publish in my school newspaper because I went to the Women's March, because I was writing for my school newspaper, and because I did that initial interview with Mayor Mary Lou Pauley. That's kind of what gave me the drive and the fire to write this book. And so if I have inspiration to write another book, I will write another book, but right now I don't currently know what it would be about. I'm also a junior in high school, and the school year is wrapping up, and so then it'll be summer, and then, of course, the dreaded senior year full of college applications. So after that, the next chapter is kind of up in the air, but I know whatever I end up doing, I'll continue writing about the issues and topics that I'm passionate about because I really love doing that, and that's what's important to me.
Absolutely. And you will keep that fire burning, Maya. I can feel it. Energy is very clearly contagious. You almost want to go out now, right after this interview, and do what you can to, to pave the way, as you put it in your own book, to pave the way for others. Thank you so much for sharing, Maya.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.